In an interview, the Taiwanese-American director Ang Lee remarked that Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon is a dream of China, a China that might never have existed except in his childhood dreams. In Lee's case, that China has to be imagined as a dream may be explained in two ways. Firstly, as a filmmaker who grew up in Taiwan and who never set foot on the mainland soil, China as a geographical entity remains a distant root that has to be imagined through audiovisual constructions which he perceived through film and other art forms. Secondly, the mainland China witnessed a massive cultural deconstruction under communist regime, that the corporeality in constructing China as a cultural nation is greatly dismantled, leaving China culturally a hallucination that can be imagined but cannot be physically touched. This not only applies to Chinese diaspora like Ang Lee, but also to those who live in mainland China as a nation-state. Lee self-remarked in his autobiography that his generation in Taiwan has little impression of China, and those who live in the mainland China is probably equally ignorant about what is China at all. Accordingly, everyone is imagining China. It is not that being diasporic exiled Lee so that he alone must imagine China. It is his state of being diasporic make him aware that he, like all Chinese, are imagining China as a dream and perceive China as a foreign body and as a fable. In fact, the film scholar Rachel considered film as a visual medium to translate that dream by concretizing the very fixture of a culture's visual construction, how culture is put together. Rachel argued that China is always and already only ever a discursive and textual construct, an idea, an argument, a set of association that many different kinds of visual, sonic, and narrative celebration of the Chinese nation. To this end, Jacobson's concept of intersemiotic translation enables scholars of translation studies to formally consider the celebration as a kind of translation. If what is China, according to Lee, is visually perceived through textual constructions such as film and drama, and if one agrees that these cultural productions may be regarded as the translation of China by an audiovisual put together, then for filmmakers like Lee, by appropriating these audiovisual constructions as translation models, China is reimagined again audiovisually through film. Intersemiotic translation models refer to the nonverbal prior materials of film. These prior materials are often neglected by researchers in this area because the very definition of intersemiotic translation, the interpretation of verbal signs by means of nonverbal sign system, is verbum-centered. These lead to the often linguistic-centered theorization of Jacobson's followers in intersemiotic translation studies, such as Gawley, Torup, and Echo. The application of intersemiotic translation in the area of film, prioritizing audiovisualizations of verb sources, entrenches in the same status quo. Film is never exclusively determined by a single verbal source. The multimodal nature of film recognizes that film audiovisual parameters, cinematography, design, performance, composition, lighting, music, and sound, is determined by other prior materials. Accordingly, what I will do is that I will consider these nonverbal quality determining sources as intersemiotic translation models. The term model is borrowed from Evan Zohar's framework, referring to the combination of rules and materials and syntagmatic relations that are subjected to repertoire underculture. In this context, models support the text producer's semantic strategy, which themselves represent as pre-existing audiovisual patterns that are generally accepted as the culture's own. For filmmakers, these audiovisual patterns are introduced as their translation models because they are symbolically empowered, which is to say, these translation models are widely recognized as authentic representation of a culture, so that when the spectators see these models in translation, they assume that they see the culture. Thus, the signifying and signified relationship between two sides of translation may often lead to cultural stereotypes, as Stuart Hall examined. Anything can be said about the culture or a group is represented through one or two visual features. Thirdly, these models are not only text, but also text through which a culture is perceived. This applies to Rachel's term to be lookedness, how culture is seen by another culture, which correlates to how culture is gazed by another culture in the Foucauldian sense. Thus, each model as pre-existing audiovisual signifying practice are spectacles through which culture is imagined. As these models are heterogeneous and belong to different semiotic forms of signifying practice, a translator's intersemiotic translation model is much more efficiently discussed if regarded as a system, which I am proposing in this presentation. The system of intersemiotic translation models consists of two hierarchized levels, culture and semiotics. The first level, cultural level, is proposed as an arch model which refers to the artistic representations that are cultivated within a culture and has the symbolic power to represent that culture. Therefore, model of home culture refers to the representation mechanism that belong to the translator's culture of cultivation, whereas model of foreign culture refers to that which belong to another culture. The system of semiotic models is dichotomized according to the semiotic system of the object of study, which is in this case the film system. Therefore, intrasemiotic model refer to representation mechanism within the film system, whereas intersemiotic model refer to the representation mechanism from non-film system, such as painting, opera, and other art forms. The system of semiotic models is a subsystem under the system of cultural models. Thus, an intersemiotic translation model always operates as a cross-level combination of culture and semiotics, which have resulted in four basic forms: home intersemiotic model, home intrasemiotic model, foreign intersemiotic model, and foreign intrasemiotic model. These intersemiotic translation models mediate effects on level C, which is the representation parameters of film language. I will exemplify these models with these cases. In the exterior sequence of Mongolian desert in Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, Li utilizes negative space composition of the Chinese inkwash painting as a home intrasemiotic model, setting up a drastic spatial contrast between human and nature. Also in Crouching Tiger, the gravity-defying choreography made famous by Chinese martial art film are deployed as home intrasemiotic model, which permits the characters using wireworks flying over rooftops and walls. In Life of Pi, the Indian composite painting as a foreign intersemiotic model contribute the visual motif of the film. An example concerns an underwater sequence where a giant squid attacked sperm whale figure dissolves into the composite of animals of Pondicherry Zoo. Also encroaching the audiovisual code of the US Western films are deployed as foreign intrasemiotic model. The bandits, the wilderness of desert, and the convoy and the raid constituted a classic model of Western films. These models are purposefully mediated by the translators through representation channels of film language, where these models mediate specific effects. Mediations can take many forms, but normally in subverting one model with another. The concatenation of home and foreign audiovisual patterns represent the notion of self and other constantly in dialogue with each other. This is shown vividly in Li's blending of intersemiotic translation models in his epic bamboo sequence in Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. The first models he appropriates is the bamboo fighting sequence made famous in King Hu's A Touch of Zen, which is a symbolically empowered model to permeate an Eastern vision circle. Li remarked that what King Hu teaches him is how to connote mood, a filmic translation which connote the protagonist's inner feelings with sheer serenity of the landscape. King Hu intended to create suspicious mood with quick editing and montage from Eisenstein, but with no shortage of Chinese aesthetic. But what An Li intends to do is to establish a different mood. He remarked that his bamboo is to show the hidden dragon, the repressed and hidden desire. He understands bamboo as one major signifier of the desire that he told his crew members what he wants for the bamboo sequence, for the whole sequence to look lost and delirious. Therefore, as opposed to King Hu's quick editing and fighting on the ground, An Li chose to have the characters fight on the bamboo tips, using slow rhythms to render a whimsical and sassy mood. On the basis of Hu's translation model, Li utilized the gravity-defying choreography with action style of Wire Fu of Hong Kong action cinema as his home intersemiotic model. The first function of Wire Fu as a translation model is to give the bamboos a sense of motion. The performers can interact more efficiently with bamboo by standing upon it, flying through it, and bending and leaping from one trunk and another, and also by having the fighters flying on the air on the bamboo tips. Li managed to establish an overall suggestion of the interaction between two fighters against the surrounding environment. To visualize this spatial emphasis, Li utilized Chinese inkwash painting as his home intersemiotic model, which facilitate a multiple perspective and drastic human nature spatial contraction. Through a landscape shot, the greater part of the screen is occupied by the bamboo forest, reducing the two fighters into two small white dots, serving only as accessories of green forest. The multiple perspective eliminates a focal point, constituting a flat mise-en-scene, which utilizes symbolic power of suggesting space through horizontal expanse than in depth. Through the visual mechanism, Li managed to render the vastness of bamboo forest as a metaphorical signifier of the hidden dragon, the constantly repressed human desires that he is hidden. In the meantime, the sequence adopts the character-driven mode, performed frequently in a Western filmic style as foreign intersemiotic model, with the camera movement tilting slowly down, with the descending character capturing not only the layers of the bamboo forest landscape, but also the changing positions of the character, the hide-and-seek, visible and invisible movement in and out of the bamboo forest sequence, visually translating the concept hidden. The human figure is also shown with a seductive close-up and slow motion as foreign intrasemiotic model. This captures the seductive gaze as Jen's face, the strength of her hair, soft caressing it, captured in the slow motion to render an exotic and sensual mien. Jen's face may also be understood as a signifier of Mubai, which is the male protagonist's hidden sexual desire, by purposefully putting Jen's face under his gaze, a male gaze. The sensual close-up of Jen's face audiovisually constructs what Li considered as the hidden dragon, the repressed and unspoken sexual desire which is only touched upon through this momentary encounter deep amidst the ocean of bamboo leaves. Her face under the male gaze also mirrors a premonition of Mubai's worst fear and what his heart desires. So just like the green destiny sword, which mirrors both the desire and the predestined doom that awaits him. An Li remarked that, more often than not, the good stuff lies on the brink between life and death. It brings excitement and nervousness, full of vitality but also fearfulness. In the case of bamboo forest, Li takes active stance to counter the stereotypes. He still deploys models with consideration of dominant poetics of culture and genre, but at the same time he appropriates these models by implementing models from another culture or another genre to innovate a creative audiovisual solution. According to Li's remark, Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon subtext very purely Chinese, but you have to use Freudian or Western techniques to dissect what you think is hidden in a repressed society, otherwise you don't get that deep. To be more Chinese, you have to be more Westernized. Through the intercultural concatenation of models, and only appeal to semantic strategies that are accepted by spectators of different genre and different cultural background, his translation may be widely accepted. Only also integrate the stereotypes of models by purposefully blending the models of different culture together, so that none of the introduced translation models is becoming strong, with always another model serve as its mediator to dilute the translation model's symbolic power. Only also visually construct China through a transnational gaze, with a cross-cultural visual put together, so that China is gazed from all angles, from home and foreign. The perspectives presented in these translation models are equally mediated and repelled upon, so that China is imagined in its entirety. China, as a crumbled version of pure language, can be put together with its scattered fragments be regained and remade.